Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Code Remix Weekly. With you, your regular host. My name is Tim Sebek, and with me is Sam Snyder.
Pleasure to be here, Tim, and good to see you again. Nice that you get to take a break from your other meetings to have this meeting, I suppose. How's your
Absolutely,
day been?
absolutely. It's been a long day, but it's been fun. It's just engaging with folks and telling them all the things we could be doing, or maybe explaining them how to do things slightly differently to make the most out of what they have access to. And then I don't know, getting to wrap up with seeing you and seeing Shannon should be great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're free after this? Nothing more bogging down the calendar?
Nothing more. I'll warm up some dinner because it is getting it's 8 o'clock here by now. But apart
Yeah,
from that, all free. So should be good.
excellent, excellent.
And of course, you're just starting your day. It's
Well, a couple hours ago, but yeah, it's noon for me, so still plenty more to do. My days have tended to be now being on the Pacific time zone. We tend to have we have people in on the eastern side of the US and Canada and in Europe. So a lot of people's days end before me. So I find that like 2 p.m. once it hits 2 in the afternoon, it's like all right, people are probably not going to bother me for a while. So now I can like really focus on doing something more difficult or involved.
yeah. Yeah, I think that works better than my system because my system is I have to cram in whatever I can do before like noon, and after that it doesn't end until midnight. So, it's, but yeah,
Oh, well, we may have to find more people to help you out. Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, but let's get on to like the regular programming that we kind of expect. So what I'll do is I'll share as folks have come to expect a couple of tabs. Just take you through a couple of things either coming up or new in the past week or so. So first up, if you are in the Netherlands by tomorrow and you want to see me or ask me anything about OpenRewrite, there's going to be a fun little session at the MiniConf, which is organized by a couple of friends of mine. And this should be fun, where I come fully prepped with just anything that folks might throw at me and try to answer all of their questions. So be sure to check it out if you're in the neighborhood. It should be a fun one. And then beyond that, Jonathan is going to be at the RSAC on the 27th, where we'll be part of a panel looking at maybe some of the limitations of traditional security remediation and some of the things that you could be doing if you have access to OpenRewrite in Madrid. So that should be good as well. Just the week after that, which is I think 2 weeks from today, there's also going to be some presentation at JavaLand, where both Milan and I will be there to each give our own presentations on OpenRewrite and Madrid. But then, apart from that, there's also going to be two friends of ours. So Simon Verhoeven will be there to present also on OpenRewrite. And Christian Grumme will also have a lessons learned on upgrading from Java EE to Quarkus using OpenRewrite. So that should be really fun. And we're also there sponsoring the event. So we will be in a corner somewhere with some booklets, some stickers, some t-shirts. So if you're in the area, definitely come see us there and talk about anything you want on OpenRewrite Limited. So that's it for events. Then also new that we just did a release today. Now, folks that know the project, they know that we do a full release every 2 weeks. And then we try to do patch releases in between. So this one is a somewhat big one. We did 37 commits to the OpenRewrite rewrite with various small fixes or improvements just to make the most out of in this intermediate version of OpenRewrite. And there's been some necessary changes as well for Maven projects, small improvements there. If you were maybe in the past not able to build a LST model of your code, now you should be able to do so if you upgrade to the latest version of OpenRewrite, the Maven and Gradle plugins, or the modern CLI. So check it out.
Yeah, and particularly that Maven issue, if you were building maybe larger or older projects, there are situations where if you had a transitive dependency where that had an invalid Maven POM, like it was missing a version number or just something that Maven couldn't deal with it, Maven would treat it as a warning and just not, include that on your class path. And if you didn't really need it, you would be fine. and we would see that and treat it as an error, like, oh, this POM isn't valid. It doesn't have a version number. We can't resolve it. So now our behavior should more closely match Maven's. And so it should always be the case that if Maven can build your project successfully, or that OpenRewrite should be able to parse its POM successfully and build the rich dependency model upon which the recipes operate.
Absolutely. So we're really striving for parity there, even if our execution models are somewhat different. But you should be seeing that from this day forward. So that's good. Then also new, but not yet related to anything OpenRewrite development specific. But of course, there's been a new Java version, and that for us is always a good moment to have a look back at where are you in your adoption of Java versions. Are you maybe, let's say, 16 versions of Java behind at this moment? Or are you somewhat closer still on maybe Java 21 and you're interested in the changes going to 24? Then it's very helpful to, look over the Oracle release notes that they have for Java 24. Because there is quite some neat things in there. So there's some primitive types and patterns that you can now be using. There's some flexible constructor bodies. And really, I think one of the things I'm most looking forward to is the the generational GC. So and also the stream gatherers are a neat feature that you can now use on Java 24. And of course, we'll be eyeing support for this in our parsers to be able to parse Java 24. And also with an eye towards Java 25, we're already evaluating what we should be doing for that particular version, because that, of course, will be an LTS release that folks are more likely to jump towards than maybe this intermediate 24. So with that, there is already an issue that you can look to for our Java 25 support. And that is, interesting to follow along. I know Knut has done some analysis where we think, well, with some reflection, we might be able to use support Java 24 from our Java 21 parser. But if we find that that is challenging, we'll be creating a new parser just for this particular release going forward. And then, of course, beyond that, there's always the friendly reminder that they have the Code Remix Summit coming up in May. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. We're going to do the hack track. It's going to be a ton of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And I've been seeing more registrations come in, so it seems like we're going to have a good crowd, not just of sponsors and not just speakers. Yes, sure, some sponsors too, but of attendees from a whole variety of different companies who are trying a whole lot of interesting different things with OpenRewrite and modern tools. I think there'll be a real opportunity to learn from other attendees and get inspired by what they're trying and succeeding and struggling to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's really that hack track that I'm looking forward to. Just bring your use case, and we're going to try to make the most out of it in the time that we have. We're also I'm also going to be flying out with part of my team to really help anyone that shows up with any use cases that they might be having. So it should be good. So that is it in terms of updates that I had lined up for this week. So let me just hide your ticket. And then it comes to the main topic for today.
Yeah, where we can welcome to the program. I think for the third time. Is this our third time having Shannon on? Welcome to Code Remix for the third time. Shannon Pamperl, hero open source contributor. As I've said before, and it's truer today than it's ever been, that if you've run a Gradle recipe successfully and gotten any amount of value out of that, Shannon probably played a role in that working. If it wasn't fixing bugs in the Groovy parser, it was fixing bugs or adding features to the recipes. And now, for the long cherished dream of operating on having recipes operate not just on Groovy Gradle scripts, but Kotlin Gradle scripts. Shannon, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for that. Your video feed is looking a little bit frozen again, but at least it seemed to have picked a nice smile to freeze on.
Gotcha. Hopefully my internet decides to behave itself for long enough. But
yeah.
Long time no see.
yeah, long time no see. Yeah, I think Shannon is tied for for our most frequent guest. There was someone else who'd also been on here 3 times, but it's not coming to mind. Maybe you've taken the crown now. But yeah, just for a little context for anyone who might not know, in Gradle you can write your build scripts in Groovy or in Kotlin. And indeed, that was my introduction to the Kotlin language. At a previous job, I was working on a Gradle Groovy build, and it was driving me crazy how my plugins would stop compiling when I would go to a new version of Groovy, or a new version of Gradle would come out that bumped a version of Groovy, and something that worked yesterday wouldn't work today. So I tried out Kotlin, and I was like, oh, I really like this. And this was years ago. And even, come to Modern and write our first build scripts in Gradle Kotlin, and then we struggled to support it. So now we kind of finally do. So yeah, Shannon, how did you decide to bite off such a big project like this? Or rather, before we talk about the background, what's the current status of our Gradle Kotlin support?
So, as you know, that issue's been out there for about 2 years now. Thanks, Tim, for that link.
Yeah.
So one of the hard parts about Gradle Kotlin DSL was getting type attribution, because all of that's kind of nestled and embedded into the Gradle distribution itself.
Yeah.
Even if you go look at IntelliJ and how they're doing it, they're reaching into the distribution that was downloaded as part of indexing.
Mm-hmm.
And then like backfilling the IDE with that type information. For obvious reasons, that works locally just fine. But then when you talk about other environments, all games are off.
Yeah, you might be running a recipe on the SAS where there isn't the Gradle is not running currently, or even necessarily available on the system where the recipe is executing, and suddenly reaching inside it or interacting with its internals becomes substantially more difficult.
Yep. And then one of our fellow contributors, Canute, has done a lot of work in rewrite Kotlin to get it to a point that it's stable for Kotlin languages as well as Kotlin scripts. So one of the things that between you, Sam, Canute, myself, even Jonathan, one of the concepts there was, well, can we take a step by doing non-type attributed Kotlin scripts?
Yeah.
And that's really what was delivered so far. So the Gradle parser can now parse the Kotlin DSL without type attribution. Okay, cool. Now we have Kotlin DSL. Next part up is really updating recipes to move away from a Groovy specific visitor to a more agnostic Java visitor, so that it can then handle both Groovy types and Kotlin types. Ironically enough, the Gradle trait comes in great handy, because both of them use the JType method invocation.
Yeah.
And we already coded around that. So very little about a lot of recipes has to change to support both. Now, there are some places where some primitive type attribution is used, and those will have to be adjusted. But it's a lot smaller of a lift in total than I think we all realized.
Yeah. I definitely thought that we were further away, perhaps, than we ended up being. Where it was like, oh wait, that got merged. Oh wow, I didn't realize it was ready for that. But yeah, we're already the Groovy DSLs are type attributed ish. We can kind of type attribute some of it, and there's plenty of things. Anything that's coming from one of the plugins that we haven't specifically supplied like a stub for is not going to be type attributed. So a lot of the recipes that interact with it already kind of do so in a structural way, looking at like, is this a method invocation called dependencies that accepts as a parameter a single lambda? Okay, we're probably looking at the dependencies block then.
Or using the trick of within method invocations and looking at your parent chain. It's like,
Yeah.
project root, dependencies, constraints.
Yeah.
All right, I know I'm in a constraints block. Let's do stuff with it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so you kind of saw that all of the building blocks were kind of available, at least for non-type attributed parsing of Gradle Kotlin scripts. We're like, oh, I kind of just have to put these together a little bit, and kind of we're off the ground. Uh, where are we at now with recipe support? Do any of the existing dependency manipulations in the latest release, perhaps that Tim mentioned earlier, support Gradle Kotlin scripts?
So some of the search recipes just worked out of the box because they were using Java visitor treat visitors. So those were really quick, easy wins. So that should work already in the current release that Tim mentioned earlier. Now, some of the dependency modification recipes, change, upgrade, remove, those are still wrapped up in a PR that I'm working on to give us kind of that ground level framework for our high profile recipes, like Spring migration or find and fix vulnerable dependencies.
Yep.
That's where my focus has been, is let's get those 4 or 5 good to go.
Yeah. If we can add dependency, upgrade dependency, and change dependency, then most of the stuff that's in a Java migration or a Spring migration or just the big migrations is just going to start working on Kotlin Gradle projects.
Exactly. And then we can obviously go back and fix the remaining recipes that are valuable to the Gradle context, but maybe a little less important.
Right, and there's a few around the margins, like one that adds, the JUnit 5 configuration as part of the Java migration, and it's like, okay, it would be good for that to work in Kotlin scripts too, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in the very first round of recipes adapted for Gradle Kotlin script support.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, right on. So this is one thing I've been wondering. Do we see a path forward for type attributed Kotlin Gradle scripts? Because every now and then, part of why I kind of pushed this off so long was I could never see a way to do that. Since as you said, there's not like a library we can pull out of Gradle to be interpret this thing as a Kotlin Gradle script. And Gradle does a bunch of code generation, right? You have all these cool type safe accessors. You put it's a little bit auto magical how you put a plugin at the top of your file, and then later on in that same file, symbols that came from that plugin can be used and are type attributed and in a statically typed language like Kotlin. And some of that is Gradle kind of sneakily treating your build file as actually 2 files, like the plugins block is almost logically totally separate from the rest of it, but it's still a bit of a challenge. Could we type attribute Gradle Kotlin script somehow?
So I think it's definitely possible. Those 2 phases make it a little intricate at first, but if you got rid of, let's say, type safe accessors, for plugins or for some of those extra features like version catalogs. All right, take that off the table for a moment. Getting type attribution is possible, I think. It just might be to that point. Either Gradle has to start providing a library that's more easily consumable, or we have to accept a Gradle distribution being available anytime we need to do parsing. Yeah. Which for things like the modern CLI or OpenRewrite Gradle plugin, a Gradle distribution is already there and accessible. It gets a little bit more tricky when you talk about the SaaS, of course.
Right.
But still doable.
I wonder how far we could get with type tables. We've already kind of started using type tables in even just on the Groovy side to represent the Gradle's public API and make that available for type attribution during parsing. Now, because I could imagine a 2-phase thing. Okay, we could bundle it, generate a type table for the Gradle distribution, include that. I mean, that's already there on the Groovy side. And so that could potentially provide attribution for at least some of the methods that Gradle itself are going to be using in the build files. But I could imagine a two-step thing now where, like, okay, we parse the plugins block, then we just kind of stop there, extract out the plugin declarations, go download those, like go resolve those plugins, generate a type table for those jars, and then parse the rest of the Gradle Kotlin script with that in mind. Now that still wouldn't be enough, since there's those jars, and then there's a code generation step that I don't really know how it works.
And there's even a complication there.
Yeah.
And even further in that you have to remember about extension functions.
Yes.
Which I don't know if type tables yet writes out extension function compatible bytecode yet.
No way it does.
But if we overcome that hurdle, then at least from a type attribution standpoint, enough information may be available such that we can just provide the Kotlin compiler enough configuration to get over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that still obviously leaves a gap for, well, what about custom plugins, custom blocks, extensions, conventions, what have you? But we'd still be a lot more type attributed than the Groovy DSL, as an example.
Right.
Now, to that point, though, there's that flip side. A lot of the recipes have to support both.
Right.
And if we use a Java visitor, well, if they're both not completely type attributed,
right,
one side has it, one side doesn't, you still have to use the least common denominator of it's not available. So I think it'll somewhat depend. But the information being there would definitely be a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a comment about the extension functions that still be done in type tables, and that is surely true. I think I would have to. There's got to be some metadata that like the Kotlin compiler outputs somewhere. I don't know if it's in the class file or what. Like, I just haven't looked under the hood on this, but there's got to be some kind of metadata about just saying that it is an extension function, because it compiles to a method call just like any other JVM method call. So there's got to be some little bit of linkage in there that says this is an extension function, not just a regular function. And I just don't know where that is. We could go figure out and make sure that's in there somewhere, but we just have to figure out what that is. You don't happen to know what that is off the top of your head, Shannon, right? You haven't dug into the Kotlin compiler about extension functions, I don't think.
I've played with them, but I haven't looked at how the bytecode gets rendered.
Yes, same. So yeah, I agree with Mr. Mkaitar that it's possible. It's possible. And if you know some specifics about it, let us know in the OpenRewrite community Slack. And the type tables are just there implemented in the OpenRewrite core repository. So if you have some relevant knowledge, we'd be interested to hear from you. But so we kind of have the structural stuff working. The recipe updates are in progress. I think that's really exciting. What what do you think is next? Like, do you have a further kind of goal for this after we get the kind of the core Gradle dependency manipulating recipes updated to work on both? Are you just gonna? And you rightly could be like, "Yep, job well done. I did what I set out to do. Like, mission accomplished." Or is there a further kind of like North Star that you're still kind of navigating towards?
I mean, as far as Kotlin DSL support, I mean, once recipes are completed, I mean, that's kind of the end of the story, or at least the end of the chapter for that.
Yeah.
And it's been a long chapter, to say
for sure.
But as you know me, like, I'll find something else in the issue catalog. Maybe version catalogs comes back up, but it's like, all right, let's go fix that the rest of the way.
Maybe. Yeah, I still think we have we do have some an open issue about TOML support for Gradle's version catalogs, and we support the TOML language now, or the format, I'm pretty sure. But there is. Do we have a TOML parser? Am I making that up? We have a TOML parser, right?
That's what we introduced last time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's why you were on here last time, and then I didn't think about it. Yeah. Yeah, so we've got support for the parser now. The recipe still needs a little bit of an update to use it, and then it'll be all groovy and Kotlin
And
and
there's a
Toml.
couple of bugs in the Toml parser that I've fixed. Like trailing commas are allowed. It's like, oh, okay, well, fine.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
My grammar.
Rerun, yeah.
But I mean, otherwise, it's doing what it set out to do. Parse Toml. Now it's like, okay, well, Gradle can support Toml, and then, all right, well, what about type safe accessors and the linkage between it from maybe a Gradle project standpoint? How do we resolve the dependencies across, or do we just continue to treat it like we have as a scan phase discovery? And
you just reminded me. Just the other day, I was working on find and fix vulnerable dependencies, and I had no choice but to curse myself for not having already gone and implemented the linkages between Gradle projects in the Gradle project marker we have that models what dependencies are requested and stuff. It doesn't model which of those dependencies are other Gradle projects in the same build and whether they're sub-projects of the current project or not. And I needed that information, so I had to include it quite hackily in the scanning phase of a recipe. And well, I had no one to blame for that but myself, since I made that design trade-off when I implemented the Gradle project marker, and now it was coming back to bite me. So yeah, that's definitely on my personal list, is to go do that so that recipes can support Gradle multi-project Gradle builds faster. There's actually a bit of a theme for me over the past week or two, is noticing recipes that made the assumption implicitly, most of the time, not an explicit thing, but implicitly kind of assumed that any repository they were going to operate on was a single project or a single module repository, which just is not the case in the real world. The multi-project repositories exist, much as it would be convenient for us recipe authors to kind of pretend they didn't sometime. So it's all just repeat my little PSA here again, or here publicly, as I've already mentioned internally to our various engineers and recipe authors. If you're writing a scanning recipe and you see a Boolean field in its accumulator, really think, is this actually a repository-wide condition that this scanning recipe is evaluating, or is this maybe evidence of an assumption that every project is a single module project? And if it is an assumption like that, consider making a map of the Java project marker to a Boolean or to whatever piece of information you are collecting that is per project. Yeah, cool. Yeah, lots of cool areas to grow into and to fill in some of these gaps, flesh out the models, flesh out the recipes, make them more language agnostic, support different things. Yeah. So, do you have?
And of course,
okay.
Of course, the moment we get closer to covering what is currently possible in Gradle, then Gradle 9 is around the corner. And we'll have probably another 5 different ways to do the same thing.
No doubt. There's never just one way to do things in Gradle. Is Gradle 9 where they're going to be introducing their like the more declarative format for build files?
Yep. So that's their plan, and then push more of the dynamics into plugins and be more static in what the build files themselves allow. But
I Kotlin DSL still.
Yeah, there's at least the Kotlin DSL still. Yeah, for sure. I've definitely both appreciated as a recipe author how a Maven POM is a bit more regular and predictable in its structure than a build.gradle file. But as someone who has to also fix things in our builds, it's definitely it sure has been convenient from time to time to just like slap a task inline right in the build file. I know it's not helping anything for maintainability, but it sure solved a lot of problems very expediently that way.
Yeah.
Just making sure that every build is unique. That's the thing.
Every build is a special snowflake. No two just alike. That's certainly true. I wonder if people will be able to be able to adopt that new kind of declarative format for doing builds. Is that great? Shannon, you have a bunch of Gradle builds that you have some degree of responsibility for or interest in at Shelter. Do you think you guys are going to be able to adopt that way of doing things?
Eventually, probably.
Eventually, yeah.
But I know at least on that project roadmap was to limit what you could do within a Gradle script, from like an invocation standpoint. Even from that viewpoint, like what programmatic code you could write in a declarative Kotlin script.
Right.
So depending on how bounded that becomes, could range an impact of taking a Kotlin DSL script to a declarative Kotlin DSL may be a lot of change. It may be a little bit of change. It may be having to write your own custom plugins, whether in build source or binary plugins. Like,
yeah, it could certainly be. It'll be interesting to adopt. I know, like, I first got experience with Gradle when I was moving a real hydra of a build from it was a mixture. You had a layer of like homegrown Python scripts that called Ruby Make because it used to be a Ruby on Rails project that was ported to Java. And then Ruby Make would call Ant and Ivy to build the Java components. And this was just such a tangled mess of scripts and different tools that I was like, we looked at like Maven and Bazel and Buck were pretty early in those days, so they didn't even fully support Windows at the time. And then Gradle, and it was kind of like, well, the only one of these build tools that is flexible enough that we could even represent the weirdness that we have here in it without breaking the existing build and like doing like a total rewrite of the build kind of thing was Gradle, which was flexible enough to accommodate all the stupid things we needed to do to like first kind of make the old build work in Gradle and then try to make it better. So if Gradle really does get much more restrictive about what it allows you to do in a build file, I think it will address both like the flexibility of the build tool is like simultaneously a strength and a weakness, right? Like it's a sword that's very easy to like cut yourself with.
It's very easy to cut yourself in your build descriptor. But I mean, the path forward has always been to define either pre-computed build scripts or rather pre-computed plugins or binary plugins. Because over there, you can actually write tests to verify the functionality.
Yes.
Whereas when you're just doing it directly in your build file, like your only test is to run it.
For sure.
And that's not exactly, maintainable code.
Yeah, certainly not if you wanted it to be reproducible and work in more than exactly that one context and take advantage of caching and some of these other features that can be stateful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always been a better.
Then you get those contexts of copy and paste to other builds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you definitely configuration as code definitely leads to a very like organic mutation as you have like one expert in Gradle or Kubernetes or Helm charts or Terraform or whatever the configuration as code thing is, and they set out something sensible that works in this particular context. And then someone else in the same organization who is maybe not as much of an expert in that specific domain is like, my thing needs to work kind of like that thing. So I'm going to copy that thing. Wait, it doesn't quite work in my context. I'll change some stuff, maybe send me at random, maybe ask ChatGPT what I need to change. And then I end up with something that kind of sort of works. And then that process repeats and repeats. And it's very much like just, the evolution of strains of configuration as code throughout the organization.
And now you have 1,000 Ruby makes.
And now you have 1,000 Ruby makes or 1,000 slightly different Terraform files. And having something like Modern being able to run a recipe across all of that could definitely be the beginning of like getting a handle on what even Terraform do I have? What even, Helm charts? What even, Toml catalogs in my Gradle build files? Like what, just getting a handle on the situation can be quite a challenge, much less trying to actually bring it into something fairly dry and testable and predictable and understood by the people who use it. So.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know what if you could wave a magic wand, Shannon, and have some feature appear in OpenRewrite. You thought about what it would be?
You asked this one last time, and that's an interesting one.
I was just kind of curious. You go in there and you make all of these like really deep and intricate contributions that take a lot of technical depth. And I know a lot of that can, certainly for me, a lot of that can just be guided by curiosity, or it can be guided by, wanting to achieve something specific, or it could be guided by like a larger kind of strategic objective. Like there's something bigger I want, and I have a longer term plan. So I guess I'm always kind of curious to what extent is this motivated by curiosity, like something tactical, something strategic.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like personal curiosity. So like Kotlin DSL in particular was all done, in my own personal time because I like little projects, kind of like Tim does. Little evening, weekend projects are nice to play around with some code when you may not get to as much during your day job, right? So I think that's what kind of drove me on the Kotlin DSL, and even the Toml parser was kind of similar, just another contributor wanting to play around with that. So I think a lot of it's probably driven by that curiosity. As to what exactly is next, I think time will tell.
For sure. Depends what you're curious about next. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And it is good to have something to tinker with, just something that is just small. That doesn't have to be production quality yet, but just something to, I don't know, make you curious about, and can it be done in this way? I don't know.
Yeah, the tinkering and that curiosity is where a lot of real expertise comes from. When I look at the best engineers I have known who have real depth of knowledge about something really useful and important, a lot of the times it started with them just being, like, how does this thing work? And going and poking at it and being like, once you understand it a little bit, like, oh, I could improve this little bit here and there. And eventually the sum of all the curiosity and the tinkering and the investigations is like, wow, this is an impressive depth of knowledge in this domain, and some real utility for the organization they're a part of. So yeah, be curious.
Yep.
Good thing for software developers.
Yep. I think my curiosity next is probably going to be either type attribution for Kotlin DSL, or jumping back and getting version catalogs implemented.
Yeah, I think version catalogs implemented would be good. It would definitely be nice to. I mean, I know just personally, I have tried at least 5 different ways of trying to be dry about version numbers in a multi-project Gradle build, and was never totally satisfied with any of them. At one point I had a script plugin that put version numbers into the extra properties extension, but I created it when I didn't know very much about Gradle, and just that ended up being like a significant source of configuration time overhead in the build, to the tune of like 10 seconds whenever anyone in a 100-person organization would type any Gradle command. Just trying to be dry about version numbers was costing 10 seconds on what would have added up to tens of thousands of invocations. And when I fixed that, I was kind of like, oh, cool. But also, oh, shit, like I wasted so much of people's time because I didn't know a better way to do this. So, having an official, supported, recommended way of being dry about version numbers could make a big difference for the developers in large monoliths of the world.
You mentioned performance, and that's kind of another little curiosity of mine at the moment. Of like, some of these Gradle recipes can be kind of timely, especially when you talk about update or change dependency in particular.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of work going on in those recipes across a myriad of different file types on their own.
Yeah.
But, when one dependency change takes a second and you need to do it, 500 times in a Spring Boot 3-4 migration recipe, like
For sure.
maybe we can do something a little bit better.
Yeah, and we definitely had some proposals around like reorganizing, like for a large migration, like the Spring Boot. Right now the way it would be structured is like, there's like just within, going from Spring Boot 1 to Spring Boot 3, there might be an upgrade dependency for each minor version of Spring Boot along the way. And it's like, well, you could reorganize it so that there was just one at the end to the final version you're going to end up with. But this reorganization would also proliferate the number of recipes in the catalog in a way that could make it increasingly confusing for people to be like, wait, I want to upgrade to Spring Boot 3.3. Do I want comprehensive best practices dependencies only, no dependencies, and that would multiply by the number of steps in the chain, so someone could go search Spring Boot 3.3 upgrade and get like 12 results, and that would be its own kind of problem. But yeah, I'm with you. I've definitely seen like some of those recipes sometimes time out on repositories, or hit like a 10-minute timeout on repositories. It's like, that's not a huge repository. It shouldn't be that time consuming to operate on. So yeah, I share your interest in improving the performance of some of these really commonly used building block recipes, however we can.
But at least not going to Maven Central for each Spring Boot version would be good.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Reducing the number of network requests that are made can absolutely make a big difference there. And we do some caching, if nothing else. When a recipe's resolving dependencies, there'll be an in-memory cache if the same dependency is requested twice. It's only going to be one request for that going out to your artifact repository rather than two. But yeah, surely more opportunities for improvement in there. Well, I think we lost Shannon due to network connectivity issues, but I was just about to kind of move into the closing remarks anyway. So thank you, Shannon, for being here, even if you're no longer with us and can't hear us anymore somewhere out there. I'm sure you know that we appreciate having you on the program and appreciate your contributions.
Very much so, yeah.
And yeah, hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversation. Oh, hey, he's back, however, briefly. Hey, buddy. Yeah, I was just saying it's a good time to transition into closing remarks. Thank you for joining us on the program. Thank you for your contributions to Gradle support and OpenRewrite. Like I said, it's never been more true than today that if you're getting value out of using OpenRewrite on a Gradle project, you probably have Shannon to thank for that. And I helped a little bit, but it was mostly Shannon. So thanks for joining us and chatting about this, and look forward to all the cool stuff that we'll get to tinker and hack on and improve in the future.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Yeah, and thank all of you for watching. Join us in Code Remix in Miami, it's only got one full month between us and Code Remix now. I really should buy some plane tickets, huh? Yeah. Use that code.
It's a good reminder. Yeah, that's I hope to see you all there. And then thanks all for joining, and we'll see you all next week.
All right, cheers.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Join us in Miami for Code Remix Summit. Attend hands-on sessions with some of the best industry experts. Looking for immediate ROI by attending? Bring a relevant business case and work directly on solutions affecting your organization in the hack track. Bring your problem, bring your laptop, and walk away with work done for your boss. Register today for Code Remix Summit.